Hi guys, I welcome you all to the next lecture in our anthropology series. So today we are going to start with the new topic, that is Mendelian genetics and other topics related to Mendelian genetics, right? So he is Gregor Mendel, and he was the person who had basically given or started the concept. He started to study the concept of genes and how these genes behave and what is the role of genes in inheritance, right? So this was what he studied, but when he was studying it, he did not know that what today we popularly known as genes, and we have so much information about it, but he was not aware of that one factor. For him it was something hidden, and he could not actually understand what is this which is causing a certain kind of inheritance in the future generations. So he called genes as factors, okay, because he was not able to understand what is this thing which is causing the inheritance to take place in this manner. So he called it factors, and it was Correns who later elevated the ideas or principles of Mendel to the to the to the status of laws, because what we today say laws of Mendel या Mendelian laws बोलते हैं ना, Mendel के laws या Mendelian laws बोलते हैं. So he had just given or you can say he has just proposed certain principles, okay, and they were not in the form of laws, and it was Correns who later compiled them in the form of laws of Mendel, right? So let's start with it now. So basically what he did now, he was trying to study how the inheritance of characters from the parents to their offsprings, how it happens and what is the mechanism. So for that he needed to have because being a human, if I have to see what humans, how they inherit, as a human being मैं कितनी generation of human beings को देख सकती हूँ, maybe 2 or 3, right, but not more than that. But this much information only is not adequate if you want to make a law, right? So what he took na, he thought that let me take up some other living organism whose many lifetimes I can see in my own lifetime, so that जो भी मैं law या principle बनाऊँ, that should be reliable. I should have adequate information. So he took up a pea plant, okay. He took up a pea plant. Now why only pea plant? So one reason I've told you that in a human life, if you want to see uh, key different generations, it is easier to see rather than if you take any other human itself. ठीक है, we all will die at the age of 70 or 80, right? In that whole lifetime, how many life of humans or human generations can we see? So that is not possible, right? So what he took a pea plant, a, because he could see so many generations, he could study in short period of time, right? First thing was this, it can be easily grown and maintained. Okay, that would be the second reason. You don't need to have much of resources, much space, so it is easier to grow and cultivate and maintain, right? It was easily cross pollinated. That means the thing is that pea plant has several contrasting features. Just I'll just show you. I've put in a picture. Yes, so these are the different contrasting features that you can see in the pea plant. For example, if you have to see the seeds of the pea plant, you will find round wala या wrinkled seed, okay. Then you can find yellow seed or green seed, ठीक है. If you go at the flower of the pea plant, you can see either white or violet, okay. If you look at the pod of the pea, you can find it yellow or full. You can find it green or constricted, sorry, full or constricted, yellow and green, ठीक है. So either pod में भी difference आ गया. Then if you look at the stem of the pea plant, it could be either terminal or axial, long or short. So you can see it is just one pea plant, but there can be so many contrasting features that a pea plant can exhibit, right? So for that reason, he thought pea plant would be the best thing to choose, because there are so many different characteristics that you can examine in different generations of the pea plants, and that too in a very short period of time, right, with very less resources, easily grown. So that is why pea plant was the apt to study. So now today we are going to do acha. Now let me tell you what we are going to do today. So basically he did two kind of studies, okay. One, he did a monohybrid cross, and the second one he did a dihybrid cross. Now what is monohybrid, dihybrid? I'll just tell you, don't worry about that. See, in a monohybrid cross what happens is, mono means one, hybrid तो आपको पता है ना, we are making a hybrid. Hybrid मतलब अब hybrid का हिंदी यार मेरे को इतना sure, I'm not too sure about the Hindi, but for example if this is 1 and this is 2 and we fertilize them together or try and make something out of it, so it will become a hybrid of the two varieties, right? So that is hybrid. And mono means when we are taking one trait, okay? When we are taking one trait and then doing this cross will become a monohybrid, and dihybrid is when you are taking more than one trait. In this dihybrid के case में तो two traits हो गए, ठीक है, and then you are taking out a hybrid, ठीक है, तो वो हो गया dihybrid. Now today we are only going to study monohybrid, and monohybrid के basis पे whatever laws he postulated, we are going to see that. So I hope you have understood now. So as I've told you, he conducted two main experiments, ठीक है. One was the monohybrid cross, that means he was taking one trait at a time, then cross pollinating that trait and looking at the next generation and what trait the next generation was exhibiting. Now do not worry, this you are going to understand with the example that I am going to give you. Just understand what is monohybrid, you understood now. Dihybrid would be when he is taking two contrasting traits in two parents, ठीक है, and then cross pollinating it and then seeing कि what is the traits that the next generation is going to get, okay. So that was the dihybrid cross, ये हम कल करेंगे, ठीक है. While experimenting, Mendel found that certain factors were always being transferred down to the offspring, and this is now what we are going to study also, ठीक है. So let's start. Okay, so basically we have talked about कि there are 7 main contrasting traits in a pea plant which he was studying, ठीक है, and that is why precisely he also took the monohybrid pea plant, right. अब now monohybrid cross क्या होता है? Took two pea plants of opposite traits, ठीक है. ये 7 traits में से आप कोई भी 2 opposite traits ले लो, मतलब color ले लो, green yellow ले लो, ठीक है, shape of the seed ले सकते हो, wrinkled round, any one contrasting pair you can take. ये जैसे 7 pairs है ना, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, you can take any one contrasting pair and then cross pollinate these two and then see what happens in the next progeny. Progeny means the next, you can say progeny means the next generation, जिसको हम next filial generation भी बोलते हैं, right. So filial generation भी बोल सकते हैं, progeny बोल सकते हैं, next generation कुछ भी बोल सकते हैं, ठीक है. So in the first generation offsprings, he took what he did basically. Now let me draw it and explain it to you. So in the monohybrid cross, what he did, he took 2 pea plants and the characteristic that he took was tall and dwarf plant. That means one plant that he took was a tall plant and one plant that he took was the dwarf plant. Dwarf plant means the short heighted and tall one means the tall heighted. Now why I am writing TT and TT, matlab here 2 T's and here 2 T's also, is the reason that whenever any organism will always have a pair, you know na, pair में there are pair में genes रहते हैं, right. So what one we get from our mother and one we get from our father, so then it becomes 2 traits, okay. So इसमें now what happens is he wanted to see the effect if we cross pollinate the tall, ये है pure tall and this is pure dwarf. So what he wanted to study was what happens if we cross pollinate 2 entirely contrasting pure tall and pure dwarf traits, तो उसकी filial one generation, that means the next generation में क्या होने वाला है, what is going to happen in the next generation. So he want to study this basically. ठीक है. So पर how would we know that one, जैसे हमने ये एक trait लिया है, this was pure tall and pure dwarf, है ना. We need to ensure that the ones we are cross pollinating, they have the purest of the characteristic that we want. So what he did, he took tall plants and unka he kept on pollinating and unka he took a lot of those generation. Maybe उसने पहले 10 generations पहले fertilize किया tall plant को, so that उनके अंदर if there were any dwarf traits वो over the generations निकल जाएं and what we get is a pure tall plant. Similarly, pure dwarf के case में भी he did the same thing. He took the plant and kept on fertilizing it for many generations so that it becomes a pure dwarf plant. Okay. So now, when we have established the fact that what plants he was having was a pure tall and a pure dwarf, so what he did, he cross pollinating. So what when you start to fertilize these traits, these traits will you can say segregate. Now let me draw it again for you because you will not understand otherwise. ठीक है. So let me make it for you a bit. Yes. So basically हमने दो, एक pure tall, एक pure dwarf लिया, right? Now what happens is, at the time of fertilization in the next generation, these traits segregate. So there will be 1T and 1T, there will be 1T and 1T. ठीक है? So now in the filial one generation, what will happen? You have to make pairs. Obviously, fertilize होगा तो there are chances that this will fertilize with this or this will fertilize with this. ठीक है? So it will come like TT. Then again if it fertilizes with this, तो ये भी TT आ जाएगा. ठीक है? Similarly, if this fertilizes with this, तो भी TT आ जाएगा. And if this fertilizes with this, तो भी TT आ जाएगा. Right? So you can see in the first filial generation, मतलब after fertilizing a pure tall and pure dwarf, they'll only be going to they are only going to get one kind of plant, and that is T kind of plant. तो हमको क्या मिलेगा in the first filial generation? TT. But now what was the Mendel's law of inheritance? The first Mendel's law was law of dominance. And what law of dominance said, because when he saw these plants, even though genetically it was not pure tall, but this generation all plants exhibited the trait of being tall. ठीक है? So मैंने क्या बोला, अब मैं अगर आपको एक पिक्चर के हिसाब से दिखाऊं, जैसे मान लो एक टॉल प्लांट था, ठीक है, उसको मैंने एक डॉर्फ प्लांट के साथ पॉलिनेट कर दिया. ठीक है? नेक्स्ट जनरेशन में हमें क्या मिला, सारे टॉल प्लांट्स मिल गए. ठीक है? जबकि दिस वॉज अ प्योर टॉल, दिस वॉज अ प्योर डॉर्फ. ठीक है? बट दे आर नॉट प्योर टॉल. बट देन ऑल्सो व्हाट आर दे एग्जिबिटिंग? इनमें 50% ट्रेट्स प्योर टॉल के हैं, 50% इन केस मतलब जो भी है डॉर्फ के हैं, राइट? बट व्हाट आर दे एग्जिबिटिंग एज अ ट्रेट? दे आर एग्जिबिटिंग द ट्रेट ऑफ द tall plant. So therefore he concluded that there are dominant and recessive traits. So what he said, there are dominant and recessive traits. So in the first filial generation, it is always the dominant trait that is going to express itself. So in this case क्या हुआ, even though we had pollinated a pure tall and a pure dwarf, what we got was tall plants. So therefore he said that in this case, maybe in the pea plant, in this case the tall plant was the dominant trait. So therefore it expressed itself in the filial one generation. So I hope I am clear with this part. ठीक है? So now let's look at it. ठीक है, Mendel conducted experiments on contrasting traits, we have talked about it, and gave the laws of segregation and dominance. Okay, dominance का law मैंने आपको भी समझाया. Now law of dominance, what it says, Mendel's first law of inheritance was the law of dominance. I've told you. In this case, the hybrid offsprings, मतलब hybrid हो गया, the next one will only inherit the dominant trait in the phenotype. तो हमने बात कर लिया ना, जैसे इस केस में what we are having a pink plant and a purple plant. ठीक है, and what the next generation is showing, it is exactly showing a purple plant. That means pink was a recessive trait and it could not express itself in the filial 1 generation. So I hope I'm clear, right? So the alleles that are suppressed are called the recessive traits, while the alleles that determine the trait are known as dominant trait. जो अपने आप को express कर देते हैं वो dominant trait होते हैं, जो अपने आप को express नहीं कर पाते वो recessive traits होते हैं. So I think there should be no confusion in the law of dominance, right? But in the law of dominance there were certain exceptions जो आप you can say बाद में limitations भी बोल सकते हो आप, because these were the things which were not seen by Mendel. ठीक है, and that was the, you can say, law of codominance. What is codominance now? Clearly we can see the example of roan coat of cattle. What happens, we have cross pollinate fertilized two pure red and pure white. हमने क्या किया, red और white को हमने fertilize करवाया, and what we get is a roan coat. That means it is not pure red, it is not pure white, it has both the features of red as well as the features of white. So what is this? This is the law of codominance, which you can say is an exception to Mendel's first law. And what is Mendel's first law? Mendel's first law is law of dominance. That means law of dominance says that whenever two pure traits, pure contrasting traits are fertilized together, in the next generation the dominant trait will express itself. ठीक है, that was the but exception क्या बोलता है, law of codominance says कि when there are two contrasting traits which are both neither too expressive या dominant, in that case maybe both will express themselves. ठीक है, so in that case you will get a mixed trait. Mixed, जैसे कि इसमें हमें red भी दिख रहा है and we are also seeing the white one. So this would be the law of codominance. That means no one character is pure dominant over the other, and therefore both are expressing each other. Both are expressing themselves, right? So this was the first exception to law of codominance. Now why I am covering this here only, because you should understand हमने पहला law of Mendel पढ़ लिया और हमने उसका पहला exception भी देख लिया, right? Now the second exception to the same Mendel का law था law of dominance. ठीक है, that means only dominant trait will express itself in the filial generation 1. पहला हमने exception पढ़ लिया law of codominance. दूसरा exception to Mendel's law is law of incomplete dominance. ठीक है, incomplete dominance. Now I'll tell you how incomplete dominance happens. What is incomplete dominance? What we did, we fertilized one pure red and one pure white flower together. ठीक है, हमने दो plants लिए, one having pure red flowers, one having pure white flowers, and what we saw in the filial 1 generation was pure pink flowers, or not, sorry, pure pink, but only pink flowers. That means अगर red was dominant over the white, then it should have had a red color, or white was dominant, it should have had a white color. But what the flower is getting is an entirely new color, not red, not white, pink flower it is getting. So that means incomplete dominance, where both of them are not completely able to exhibit itself. So they are, you know, उनमें कुछ incomplete dominance हो रहा है. ठीक है, you are not able to say specifically कि which trait is dominant, so वो incomplete dominance हो जाता है. So I think in monohybrid cross, today we are doing the monohybrid cross of the Mendel. उसमें हमने लॉ ऑफ डोमिनेंस पढ़ लिया और उसका क्रिटिसिज्म या उसकी एक्सेप्शंस भी हमने देख लिया. दिस वाज द फर्स्ट लॉ दैट ही गेव बेस्ड ऑन द मोनोहाइब्रिड क्रॉस. द सेकेंड ही गेव वाज लॉ ऑफ सेग्रीगेशन. मेंडल ने दो ही दिए थे बेस्ड ऑन दिस मोनोहाइब्रिड क्रॉस, लॉ ऑफ डोमिनेंस एंड लॉ ऑफ सेग्रीगेशन. लॉ ऑफ डोमिनेंस हमने देख लिया, क्रिटिसिज्म या एक्सेप्शन भी देख लिया. नाउ लेट अस लुक एट लॉ ऑफ सेग्रीगेशन. नाउ व्हाट इज लॉ ऑफ सेग्रीगेशन? Again, we'll take the example of this red flower and pink flower only, and now let me just try and draw it for you, okay? Because this is the last that we are going to do today. I know some people who will not be from the biology background will find it a little tough, but I'm trying to explain and break it up for you as much as I can. So we said that we took a red, तो हम प्योर रेड को हम आर आर कर देते हैं, एंड प्योर वाइट को हम कर देते हैं, प्योर वाइट को हम स्मॉल आर आर कर देते हैं. ठीक है. सो आई टोल्ड यू व्हेन वी हैव टू इन द फर्स्ट फीलियल जनरेशन जब जाना होता है तो ट्रेट्स विल सेग्रीगेट ईच इटसेल्फ. ठीक है, एज 4 different alleles, and then they will become the ओके. सो इस केस में हमने फर्स्ट फीलियल जनरेशन में क्या देखा? वी गॉट पिंक फ्लावर्स. ठीक है, व्हाट वी गॉट? पिंक फ्लावर्स. दे ऑल वर पिंक फ्लावर्स, राइट? इफ आई हैव टू शो यू ऑल्सो, ये जो मर्जी कर लो, इन द फर्स्ट फीलियल जनरेशन वी आर ओनली गोइंग टू गेट पिंक फ्लावर्स. ठीक है. सो नाउ व्हाट हैपन्स इफ वी गो टू द फीलियल जनरेशन 2. अब हम इसकी नेक्स्ट जनरेशन देखते हैं. सो वॉट इज इट गोइंग टू डू? ये अपने आप को अलग अलग कर देगा. दीज 2 traits विल गेट सेग्रीगेटेड. सो ये आर एंड आर बनेगा, राइट? देन आर 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 एंड आर आर. ठीक है. सो नाउ इफ वी क्रॉस पॉलिनेट ऑल ऑफ देम, what we see, or not, let's not do it this way. What we do is, now we take up, I'll just show you with one example. In the second generation, what we are basically getting only pink flowers, right? So what we do, we take 2 pink flowers and then fertilize them. Okay, so pink flowers के केस में क्या होगा? इसमें ये characters हैं. So now let's, ये 2 pink flowers हमने ले लिए. Now what we are doing, let me explain to you again. In the first generation, what we were doing, we were taking pure red, pure white, fertilizing them. तो first filial generation में we were getting only pink flowers. ठीक है. तो now what we are doing, we are taking a 1 generation more. So pink flowers we got in the filial 1 generation. Now we are fertilizing these pink flowers together. ठीक है, in the next filial generation to see what happens. So what we see is that we get RR. ठीक है, then we get RR, then we get, let me change the color so that it looks a little visible to you, RR, and we get RR. So what do you see when we go to filial generation 2, when where we are fertilizing pink flowers together? What we see, we get 1 pure red flower, pure red मिल गया ना. This is pure red RR, we got the same. We get 1 pure white, मिल गया ना, एक pure white, एक white मिल गया, एक red मिल गया, and 2 pink flowers मिल गए. So what happened? Filial generation 1 में we got all pink flowers. Second generation में we got 1 red, 1 white and 2 pink flowers. So this is what it is shown in the picture also. 1 red in the next generation, 1 white and 2 pink flowers. So what it says that in law of segregation क्या होता है? For example, अगर ये pink बन गया था, if the colors of red and white would have mixed, so in the next generation we could not have got red and white again. But we get red and white again because the traits at the time of fertilization again separate. That means this R and R do not mix together, but they remain independent to each other, and that is precisely the reason that in the next generation we get the same traits back again. ठीक है? So the law of segregation states that during the production of gametes, ठीक है ना, during the production of gametes, gametes क्या हो गया, जब भी हम we are mixing or we are fertilizing the two traits together, two copies of each trait or factor segregate so that the offspring acquire one factor from each parent. तो उसने क्या बोला, at the time of fertilization ये जो RR है, this RR that we have are going to separate itself to two independent traits so that the child has the equal chance of getting different traits and one from each parent. ठीक है? So I hope I've made my point clear. In other words, you can say the alleles, the pairs segregate during the formation of gamete and reunite. Reunite हो गया ना, ये पहले segregate हुआ, ठीक है, and then it reunited, right? फिर से जुड़ गया, फिर से segregate हो गया at the time of new fertilization. So this is how it means basically that the factors do not mix and they separate at the time of fertilization. So these were the two laws of Mendel which he had proposed based on a monohybrid cross. So I hope you are clear with it. Tomorrow we are going to do the dihybrid cross and the criticism and the acknowledgement that the Mendel's law got. Okay, so tomorrow we are going to complete this chapter. Sorry, not the chapter, the topic. If you like it, and if you like it, please guys like, share and subscribe. Thank you.